Sure.
So what I would guess is you have a belief is what makes me okay or good enough or worthwhile is accomplishing things. Say that.
But what makes me okay or worthwhile is accomplishing things.
Does that feel true?
Yes, it does. Yeah, it does feel true.
So therefore, once you say that, once you base, again, where there's no judgment involved, this is just what happened as a kid, and we'll see how the beliefs get formed. But once you say that, my okayness is a function of accomplishing things, then when you do, I feel good about myself. Apart from the accomplishment, it's got nothing to do with what it is you do. It's just if I accomplish something, that means I'm okay. And what it means is if I don't, since I need it to be okay, there's a sense that I'm not okay. So there's a sense of discomfort, a sense of anxiety, a sense of something negative. It's different with each person, but some level of discomfort or anxiety. Okay? So we could explain your impatience, therefore, by the belief, what makes me, and I'll find the word in a minute, good enough, okay, worthy, etc., is accomplishing things. So can you see that if I weren't even talking about you, but I described your behavior to Joe, and we then said, what could explain that? And I said, what do you think about the belief, what makes me good enough or okay is accomplishing things? Could you see that that could explain his behavior?
Sure.
Yeah. So when you find the belief or beliefs, the behavior all of a sudden makes sense. Because you might say, why am I like this? I try to stop, it doesn't make sense. I say I'm going to be different, but it doesn't seem to happen. As you yourself said, it's a belief-driven universe. When you find the belief, the universe starts making sense.
Right.
So we're okay there?
Yeah.
So we're going to get rid of that belief. However, in order to get rid of that, as I say, that's your survival strategy. That's what you need to be okay. So you don't want to take that away until you handle the belief underneath it. So the belief underneath it is, what does it make you? Because you've got the belief, if it says what makes me good enough is accomplishing things, you got to have the belief I'm not good enough. Or if you say what makes me worthwhile, or what makes me worthy, or what makes me important, whatever you get out of that, so I'm going to ask you to look inside, what is the feeling that's not there, which becomes there? And again, intellectually, well, of course I'm important, I know I'm good enough, but there's something that you've been able to keep down with your success and the fact you worked on yourself, I'm sure, in many different ways over the years. But underneath it all, there's one of those words. So I'm not something, and what makes me that something is achieving things.
The words that come up are important, not important. Another word that comes up is noticed. Not noticed, am noticed.
Okay.
So important, not important, am important, not noticed.
Okay, good. So we're going to take I'm not important.
Okay.
And then what makes me important is, in your own words, I sort of stated
Sure.
How would you say what makes me important is?
What makes me important is getting things done that other people can applaud, notice, buy.
Getting things done. Okay, well, it's basically accomplishing things. You say
that's right.
That would be other beliefs involved.
Okay.
And that might be another aspect of that is the belief, as I just said, what makes me important also or worthwhile is having people think well of me. So doing things. Another belief could very well be is there's nothing wrong with contributing to people. That's a wonderful thing. But if you say what makes me worthwhile is contributing to people, then again, you've based your self-esteem on it, and you've got to do it, and there's no break from doing it, and if you don't do it for a minute, you don't feel good about yourself. So we can take wonderful things. There's nothing wrong with getting things done. World would stop if we didn't.
Sure.
The only problem is when we say that's what makes me important, then it becomes driven, and there's anxiety when you don't. Okay? So would you acknowledge then we're going to do two? We're going to do one, but let's do two. So
all right, the 2 for 1 special.
Two for one. So can you see therefore that I'm not important would be the basic belief underneath it. And if you don't feel important as a kid and you got things done and got acknowledged, you'd say, what makes me important is getting things done. And that now would not totally, but largely explain an issue that you're aware of in your life, which is impatience.
Right.
Okay, good. So we're ready to go.
Let's do it.
So this is the first part. That's what is normally actually done in a session is you identify the issue. You identify at least a couple of beliefs to get started on, and if there's more, then you handle those later on.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to start with I'm not important. Okay, good. So the first question I'd like to ask you, Joe, is where did that come from? You weren't born with it. It's there today, and I'll just give you a clue based on my experience with thousands and thousands of people. It comes in the first 5 or 6 years of our life in interactions with our parents.
And you expect me to remember that?
Yeah.
I'm 55, so you're asking me to go back 5 decades.
I've worked with people in their 80s. So
And you believe them when they said they remembered?
See, I'm not asking you to remember the day when Dad said so-and-so. I'm asking you of a general overall. And since, again, I've done this so many times, I can give you a little bit of a hint. I'm not important generally comes from one or two things. Either Mom and Dad weren't around at all physically, or they were around and you didn't feel heard or gotten, so they were there doing something with the other kids or with the house or whatever while they were watching TV. So what does it mean to a 3, 4, 5-year-old when what you want is mommy and daddy and you can't get their attention because they're not there physically or they're not there emotionally? It's got to be me. I guess I'm just not important, because if I were important, they'd be here.
Yeah, they would notice.
Yes. So that's the clue I can give you. Now I just ask you to go back and say, I'm not asking you to remember the day that they didn't show up, but you have a sense as a child that Mom and Dad were not around and you didn't get the kind of attention you wanted.
Sure. Yeah. So Father wasn't around.
Okay.
And Mother was distant anyway, emotionally. So they would make me, or I would conclude that I either don't exist or I'm not important or I'm invisible.
It's not as essentially invisible to them.
Yes.
Okay. So, to the extent you can, and people can in varying degrees, go back and be a little kid, and you obviously have memories to that of being invisible, and Dad, where's Dad? He's out wherever he was, working, whatever, and Mom was there, but emotionally shut down and not available to you. Just make that as real as you can to the extent you can, and is it real to you that what that meant to you as a kid was, I guess I'm just not important. Because what I'm looking for is, where is it real to you that you concluded that? You came into life, you didn't have the belief, and then somewhere along the line, you did. So we're looking for where it comes from. And can you see that that would be a reasonable conclusion for a young kid, given your experience with your parents? So now, logically it makes sense. But before we go on, I would just like to have you make real that, yeah, I could see that that's where it came from. And I'm not saying I remember the day I said it.
Sure.
But you have a sense as a kid that, again, that wasn't one time. That wasn't 50 times. That was hundreds of times. It was every day. That Dad wasn't around, and Mom, hundreds of interactions in one day with Mom, and you never felt gotten. Can you see that literally out of thousands of times, and it might have been by the time you were 2 years old, before the next 10,000 times, there was just sense, what's wrong with me? I guess I'm not important.
I can easily see that and start to feel it, yeah.
So there's some sense that the belief I'm not important was formed out of literally hundreds of times where you didn't get the time and attention from Mom and Dad that you wanted.
That was reconfirmed,
yeah.
Sure.
Okay, good. So can you see that wasn't a mistake?
Yeah.
It might be today, why did I say that? That's a very reasonable conclusion for a kid given your experience to make. So it wasn't silly.
Yeah, based on what I knew at the time, sure.
But, I mean, you said, what does it mean that this is happening in Mom and Dad in the way they treat me? And that's what 99.9% of all kids would say. Does that make sense to you? Good. Okay, good. So now we have a source to it.
Okay.
So what I'd like to say is, that is a valid interpretation. So as opposed to certain disciplines or cognitive therapy, I won't say that that's wrong or irrational or silly. I would say that's what anybody would say. It makes sense. I'll validate it in effect. Okay, now let's go to the next step. So I want to make sure it's clear that that's a valid interpretation that almost any kid would have made.
Sure.
Now, as an adult,